on the inside, they copied the idea of the traditional Indian step wells. Now, a step well is a body of water often used in dry climates where the presence of the water causes evaporation, and the evaporation causes cooling, and therefore people feel comfortable even though the temperature is quite high. Yeah. The humidification of the air causes a drop in temperature. They copied that idea at the base of the building by creating these beautiful ponds. So the students all hang around there, and they have their fashion shows in the middle of the pond, and they all sit on the steps around it. But the water is the one that makes the microclimate. It reduces the heat in summer. These are some of the images, the axonometric. This is what the building looks like. It's basically a rectangle, which has big holes cut in the middle of it. At the bottom, you have this landscape of water and plants. Yeah. And all around the perimeter, you see those elements there. These are the jali. These are the screens that shade the building from the hot sun in Jaipur. These are photos I took actually from the top looking down with all the students hanging out in the middle of that space, and these are some interior shots. This was done not by the architects but by my team, just to see what this building is doing through a light simulation. And you actually see that it works really well. Isn't that gorgeous? Maybe I'm just being an architect. I really enjoy the building and the ideas behind the building, but also I think it's very beautiful. Yeah. It's not just intelligent, it's actually very beautiful. Who says environmental architecture must be ugly? Yeah. It can be aesthetically very satisfying. These are some of the views from the inside, close-ups of the facade, and some simulation showing you the effect on the facade. On the left, without; on the right, with jali. What is the effect of these stones? These elements. So, in today's market, green is an act of procurement. Procurement means I buy. Yeah? We seek technology and imports that make our projects green or greener. Yeah. Every time we buy something, we think we're becoming greener. But actually, to be sustainable is to be self-sufficient and to be local. Yeah. The quest, the search, the ambition is not just to reduce consumption, but to also reduce reliance on technology and imports. To use local knowledge, to do things that don't require technology. 3, green is the well-being of the occupant. Yeah. In the rating tools, in the certification tools, you will find that the idea of well-being is repeated over and over again. How is well-being defined? How is it defined in the industry today? Let me show you very quickly what is meant by well-being. The thing that's meant by well-being is this thing called indoor environmental quality. Yeah? If you look at rating tools, they will tell you that you must achieve certain conditions of air quality inside the building, certain thermal conditions, which means thermal comfort, temperature, humidity, certain visual conditions, which is to say the kind of light, yeah, the visual comfort, and lastly, acoustical comfort, meaning noise, insulation from noise. This is what all the rating tools ask you to do. This is what I call the physiological tier, which means physical comfort. Yeah, my body, my hearing, my senses. This is my comfort level, physiological comfort. And the way they ask you to do this is they ask you to avoid certain things. So it's the principle of avoidance, which means to say, do not exceed the limit. It cannot be more than 25 degrees centigrade. Your indoor condition must be 22 to 26 degrees centigrade. This is the bandwidth. Don't avoid, you must not exceed this bandwidth. So it's the principle of avoidance. Some rating tools, very few, but some rating tools are also talking about things like daylight, ventilation, views to the outside world, and the building occupant interface. This I call the psychological tier of comfort, which is to say, how does the building make me feel in my head? Not just by heat exchange or discomfort? How does it make you feel? And this is called the principle of affordance. Affordance means you are seeking out attributes of the environment that improve your self-well-being. Not just reduce the risk of discomfort, but actually improve comfort, well-being. Yeah. How do rating tools fare on indoor environmental quality? The Singapore Green Mark gives only 8% of its total points to human comfort. LEED 21%, GBI 24.4, Lotus is the highest with 27%. This is, by the way, Green Mark, the highest category is energy, more than 50% goes to energy. Yeah. What is perhaps more disturbing is that in the Singapore Green Mark, things like daylighting and ventilation, where it's a requirement, is all about energy efficiency, not about comfort. Not about people, but it's about the system. Oh, I have daylighting, which means I can use less electrical light. Yeah, you see the logic? It's not, I have daylight, people are happier. I have daylight, less electrical light. So the logic is technological. Only in Lotus are we starting to see things like this being mentioned. Culture, connectivity, climate change. Yeah. These are things that we are starting to see in Lotus, in the Vietnam too. Very interesting. What this is telling us is that well-being, as it's currently defined, is not enough. And some tools are actually pushing the idea to be wellness. Okay, what is wellness as distinct from well-being? I didn't make up the word wellness, by the way. It sounds like I'm making it up, but it isn't. Wellness is defined by the World Health Organization as the optimal state of health of individuals and groups. And there are two focal points, two focal concerns. Yeah? One is the physical, psychological, social, spiritual, and economic well-being. But secondly, also the fulfillment of your expectations in family, in society, in community, and so on. Yeah. So this is what the United Nations World Health Organization, WHO, defines as wellness. What they are saying is that it's more than physiological, it is also psychological and emotional. People don't just want thermal comfort, they also want thermal delight. That it is more than avoidance, it is about affordance. Yeah? It is the fulfillment of expectations, not just the avoidance of discomfort. It is about our place in community, and it is connectivity with nature and outdoors. Okay? I've distilled it into 3 or 4 key points. And I want to show you a project in Hong Kong, which I like very much. This is the Sao Ping South Estate. It's a public housing project in Hong Kong. From a distance, it looks like any other public housing project until you go closer and you see all these wind turbines. You can always tell a building is trying to be, a project is trying to be green if they have solar panels and wind turbines right at the steps as you go up. Okay, we forgive them for this. We forgive them because they do a lot of other interesting things. Yeah? And one of the things that they did was that they began to see the ground plane of this estate as being very important to the community life of the people living in this estate. The ground plane was just not a place to park your car and go home. Yeah? The ground plane was where you interact with each other and you build bonds with your neighbors. Because once you're in your apartment, you live very private lives. So this plane was very important. And they did this at the very early stage of thinking, how do we create more airflow through the ground plane? And they actually studied how to place the blocks, rotate the blocks so that the wind would flow through in summer, and it would not be so windy in winter. You can do this now with tools. They even studied things like overshadowing and daylighting to make sure that the spaces on the ground, which are going to be designed as gardens, old folks areas, young playgrounds, so on. These things would have the right environmental condition for people. The second thing that they did was that they invested in greenery. They created one of the most densely greened estates in Hong Kong. They put plants everywhere. They put plants obviously on the ground, but on walls, on roofs, on walkways, on slopes. Any place they could find that could grow plants, they covered it with plants. Yeah. And this has created an environment, a microclimate, that is very pleasant, very soothing, but it just feels like you're coming home to a garden. Yeah. And it makes you feel well. You see, the difference between avoidance and affordance. Yeah? Avoidance is don't do something in case it makes people annoyed. Affordance is make people feel better. And they make their home into a garden. And the third thing that they did, which I think is incredibly important, is they involved people during the design stage. They involved the future tenants of the estate. They consulted them, they gave them a chance to do stuff, to contribute ideas, so that by the time the project is completed, they become stakeholders. They already own the place. It's not given to them by the architect, they help to create it. This is a very powerful form of engagement. I give you an example of this, which I just absolutely love. You see this photograph here? This is what they call the seedling campaign. Now, if you are a resident who's going to live in this estate, they will give you a seedling, a small plant, like that. And you have to look after the plant while the building is being constructed. For the 10, 12 months of construction, you are looking after this plant. You have to water it, you have to put it to bed, you have to kiss it goodnight, you have to look after the plant. Because when it is completed, you plant it in the estate, and it grows into a tree. This is I think it's an incredibly brilliant idea of how you can create emotional connection with people and the landscape. Every time you walk by this tree, it reminds you of, that's my tree. That's my tree. Oh, this tree was this small when my child was born. Now it's this big, he's going to university. You see how it connects you with time. Yeah? It connects you with where you are. It gives you a sense of ownership. Not everything that is important can be measured or audited. Yeah? Not everything that is important can be measured. A building's occupant's experience can only be partly quantified. The qualitative experience, the qualitative dimensions are often missed out when we talk about green buildings. Wellness and sustainable buildings must be described as something more than health and comfort. I'm not saying health and comfort is not important now, but it's not enough. There's more. And that something more is about how we connect to the world, the outdoors, to nature, to each other as a community. Buildings have the power to do this. You as an architect have the power to give people access to all of these things and create things that are more enduring and lasting.